Okay, so mouth and lips video. So I've enlisted the help of Frank here in digital form to help me with this, mainly for just reiterating, like we were talking about in class, the shape of the mouth and the shape of the forehead and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, we can look at it from the top. You can see that angle, that curvature of the top of the head there, very important. And then we can see the different kind of shape right there. How angled the lips are, how much of a quick angle that is. And also, when I bring my little pen tool back in, that soft S shape I was telling you about. So yeah, we've got our eye socket like that, but here's that soft S. So we come out. Obviously, this is the cheekbone right here. We're coming out of the cheekbone, then we go in. So we're tracing the back of the teeth there. Because if my eye's there, my mouth corner is going to be roughly about that area. Very, very important. And you can see here, in line with the front of the nose, where the teeth are. I was getting a lot of people today. After they've added the lips and stuff, the lips only came out to like there, which meant their teeth would have to be back here, which means their skull is all kinds of messed up. So lots of stuff to think about, like that. Lots of stuff to think about. But this skull, by the way, is in ZBrush. It's part of a anatomical set here, which is inside Tools. Feel free to have a look at that. It's fun. But what we're going to look at, what we're going to use it for, is to build on top of. A little bit like the video I've just done, where I went through the different ways of building the head from level 1 to level 4. I'm going to do a bit of a level 3, level 4 approach with this. And I'm going to bring in a cylinder for the mouth. So let me insert a cylinder. There we go. It's all the way down there. Where is it? There we go. Where's the head? Where's the head? Oh, oh, there we go. Whoop. Nope. There we go. Boop. Lift it up. There we go. Sorry, we got there at the end. So yeah, bring in the cylinder. And this is that barrel of the mouth, So I'm having trouble with this. Trouble with this. There we go. This is that barrel of the mouth I was telling you about. So, if we bring in something like this, we can clearly see how that works around the mouth. If I go to transparency, so you can see the teeth inside, and if you imagine the lips, you can see the distance. So this is about where the lips are going to be. So you can see the distance between the lips and the teeth. So it's really important that we pay attention to that angle right there. Or that position, not angle. So I can just bring up this kind of stuff. And yeah, this is me kind of doing a bit of that, adding other geometry in there for my mouth and that kind of stuff. But just for this, I'm not really bothered about the eyes or anything. But essentially, when I've even got a basic skeleton shape done from my, my single mesh, what I'm thinking about is the mass of the mouth. I'm always thinking about that shape, the mass of the mouth, the mass of the mouth. Cool. Because when it actually comes to the sculpting of the mouth, it's not actually that difficult, I don't think. Again, in the other videos I showed you, one way you could do it, I'm not particularly very good, is by bringing in this whole upper lip section, this whole upper triangle section with the philtrum going out to the corners as like a tube mesh, and then pulling it into place. Like I said, I build off that mass. The most important thing is, though, positioning. So I'm not going to go into how much about to sculpt the mouth in this video too much. It's more about positioning. So, again, our eyeballs are going to be on our head there. And remember, going down about there in this general area is where the corner of my mouth is going to be. And then obviously if I've got my nose coming in, my nostrils are coming into my face. like that. That's my philtrum, obviously, and then I got my lower lip going into my chin. And then I got that soft S coming back. So you can see how important these kind of things to think about are. One thing I will remind us as well is that angle of the mouth, angle of the lips. So it's going to be different from all our different references and all our different subjects, but in this area here, if we look at the curve of each lip, look at this top lip there, just think of it as a flat plane and find out what angle, work out what angle that lip is facing in. Just from that, the middle section. And then do the same for the lower lip. And you'll see that there is a kind of bit of an overlap. Sorry, I got a bit of Pardon me. Pardon me. And you see there's a bit of an overlap like that. From subject to subject, it's going to be different. So Laura, for instance, has a very steep upper lip and a very, very steep lower lip. There you go. So that's her chin. So her lower lip and like that, her upper lip really cross over very fast. That crossing over section right there is actually quite close to the lips. But if you've got someone like Anthony, his crossover section is far more in front of the lips. And that's purely because the way the lips are structured around the face. You know, this is all down to ethnicity, it's down to body types, down to loads of different things, even down to stuff like fat deposits. Change the shape of the lips, but it's always important to look at the shape and the angle of the lips to make sure we're getting it right. But all that is just secondary. It's really easy to get to that point. And how we get to that point is, again, if you've done something like this where you bring in separate geometry for different sections of the face, or even if you're doing the old-fashioned way, my way, where we're building everything from one piece of geometry, when you've got this mass here, all I'm going to do is get the DAM standard, so BDS, make sure I find the corners of the mouth in line with the pupils, downwards, roughly about there, and I'm just going to DAM standard right across. I'm not worrying, I'm not trying to make a lip section, I'm not trying to do anything. I have seen a few people kind of do this. No, don't do that. That's worrying. That's trying to get stuff looking perfect too soon. Find your pupils, go down, find that corner of the mouth, go across. Boom, just like that. You can make all the nice shapes later on. Because at this point, what I'm doing is I'm thinking, well, is that the right position? Luckily with this sculpt, I can actually like get a good position because it's going to be basically in line with my teeth. So it's going to be there, essentially. Boom. C'est bon. And that's what I do. So you can notice then that I found the middle of my eye, poke, brought it across, and then I even pushed down a little bit in the corner, and that's because I'm getting those fatty deposits that are in the corners of the mouth, the nodes of the mouth. If I bring in this little thing I was using in the other video, we're talking about this section right here. Right here. So you got the corner of the mouth there, obviously the philtrum, that's the muzzle, but then you've got these little like fat deposits that are here and here. Some people's are very pronounced, some people's are very subtle. Again, person to person, you just got to pay attention to the reference. That's all you got to do. It's not hard. Just keep looking. If you're not checking your reference every 10 seconds, check your reference every 10 seconds. But that's what essentially I'm doing at this point, is I'm just starting off that shape. And then from there, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to look at my reference, look at my subjects, look at what I've got in front of me and make adjustments. So if I'm going off the reference I've got to my side here, what I've got is quite a large bottom lip. So I'm going off this image I've just brought on then. Oops, data come here. I'm going off this reference I've got here. Apparently I can't touch it. Why can't I touch this? Why can't I do anything? There you go. I don't know why that was doing that. Yeah, I'm going off this reference, so I can see it's got a bit of a bigger lower lip. Remember though, when it comes to the outsides, where you've got these two shapes here and here, like there and there. I'm not having anything sharply defined. I'm having that be softly blended in because that's how lips work. So what I can do is just use the move brush and some masking so I can like mask off this lower lip. Again, make sure I've got symmetry turned on, which you should have. Mask off that lower lip and then just use my move brush to shape. So this is quite a tight Cupid's bow at the top, and then we come down, which looks to be a little bit of a bend. So we will have a nose here, obviously. So it looks like there's a bit of a bend in the filtrum there. Use a dam standard on a fairly low setting. I can just hold Alt and sharpen that edge off just quickly. It's not going to be very pretty, but it gives me a better idea about stuff. There we go. Looking around, looking underneath, looking from the front. Flip the mesh and I can do the same thing underneath, so I can start pulling in that, because I find that this section here was sticking out too much. Start pulling in the lip, so we've got a nice chin going on here. Again, just get that chin kind of defined a little bit. Hold Alt while using the dam standard, just to use kind of get that pinch function going on. Again, that's great when it's at a lower setting. And then I'm just going to kind of soften the corners a little bit. Unmask. So boom, look, those are lips already. Those are lips already. See how important it is? And that's at a low resolution. So if I was to, that's not 224. Okay, so 224 on this particular skull, 224 is actually too low because of scale, the size of the actual skull. So I'm going to go up to about 350 just for this one. There we go. So this is about the density that we would have with our 224 resolution because of the initial scale of the object we're using. So when I've done that, I've just got a little bit of extra, geometry to deal with, or to work with. I can just close, again, using that dam standard, I can just close that section. Clay buildup, I'm just going to lightly bring in those shapes again on the lips. Just lightly bring that in. Same on the lower lip, lightly bring that in. Let's move that in. Yeah, just like that. So very, very quickly, it's easy to get those lips in there. Because really, I'm not... What am I looking for? I'm looking for the pupil downwards. That is roughly in line with the corners of the mouth. In profile, it's the front of the eye downwards. That's roughly where the corner of the mouth. So you can literally use those two to almost like plotting the position. I'm looking for the curvature of the face. My mouth shouldn't be the same curvature as the front of my head. So whereas the top of my head there is that kind of curvature, my mouth needs to be that. Not, well, on a better curve, Dave. Like that. See the difference? Very, very important. Because that's, this is where the teeth end. That's where you're going up inside the skull over here. So it just goes into a cavity. That's where the lips fall into. And then, again, if I was to just push a little bit further on, and maybe you have done something like this, you've made a skull shape and then you bring in those additional kind of shapes on top of it, using that level 4 kind of method. What I can do is bring in like a tetrasphere, make sure my depth is, halfway. I can bring in my cheekbones. I'm at a cheekbone, sorry, my cheek fat. So this is that cheek fat which comes down. If we just so I'm just going to select those. I'm just going to mask them, separate. Oh, no, wrong menu. Separate. It's been a long day. Split, mask parts, so they're their own thing. Dynamesh them. There we go. You know, that's my cheek, at least in that bit anyway. Get that in there. Go into my cheek. Because hopefully this might actually help you understand why I keep talking about, you know, that part of the maxilla where I keep talking about the corners of the eyes. Hopefully this will help. You know, I could do something like the curved tube and, you know, get that shape in there, which is the fat of the eyebrow. And I can just, again, because this is geometry, all I'm doing is just bringing it in first of all, and then just pushing and pulling it around, you know. It's a bit more abstract here because I've not got eyes or eyeballs to kind of base it off, but I'm using my best kind of anatomy knowledge just to pull this into shape. Knowing where the fat deposits are going to be, where the bony elements are going to be. You know, bringing that eye brush, bringing an isosphere. Oh, that needs to be going in more, so get the depth. Bring the depth in. You know, I could use this to now fill out the corner of the head, the temporal ridge. Doesn't really matter what geometry you use at first. I'm using spheres for a lot of this because they're just soft shapes as it is at the beginning. You know, they're already soft shapes. I don't need to sharpen down or soften down any sharp edges. So that is allowing me to then put the muscle structure, the fat structure at the sides of the head. You know. And if we start to dynamesh this stuff together, and I'm literally just going to dynamesh this onto the skull as well. So this one's going to be a fun one as I merge the skull down. And then let's go 250 on this one. So I've now just dynameshed all that geometry I've just made onto the skull. Obviously, I've got holes there that I've not quite sorted out yet, but and then why don't I merge down the mouth? Oh, let me do this a bit of a again. Let's do that at 438 to scope a little bit. Yeah. You know, a quick little mess around, not paying too much attention, but you can see there that using the skull, using simple shapes, just using simple knowledge, I'm able to get a mouth in there very quickly. The mouth isn't a very complex complex place to understand. You know, again, you've got your nodes. Let me just get that big circle out of the way. That's gonna. Come here. There we go. There we go. Right. So you got the corner of the mouth there. That's easy because obviously that's the pupil up here that we draw down roughly. Corner of the lips there. Using that damn standard, you just literally slice in the meeting point. And like I said, I like to put in that little bit of a mark either side because that allows me to initially define kind of like those fat deposits I was talking about, which are very prominent in some people, not very prominent in others. And then after that, what I'm doing is literally just shaping the mouth. You know, looking at my subject, what kind of shape have I got? I got that centerpiece shape. Do they have that centerpiece? And then, do they have any kind of overlapping shape on the upper lip? And then we've got the lower lip there. You know, around there, obviously you've got the lower lip with a balcony. How much of a balcony have they got going on? Is it, so if I draw it to the side here, do they have a proper balcony? Or is it like quite a steep little angle there? I think Anthony is quite prominent with that one. Do they have something like Saka where it's more like this kind of shape? So there's not that curve underneath the lip. It's just the lip and then it's a slow gradient into the chin. Or have they got something like your Laura, which is much more like that kind of shape? It's very, very flat. I think you'll find this kind of stuff commonly in people who've got underbites. Or overbites, sorry. Overbites. What's the shape of, you know, these deposits either side? What's the shape of the philtrum area here? So this is what I was seeing a lot. I've seen a lot of people, again in my little drawing to the side, where they were either not considering that whatsoever, or they would, the philtrums like that, they were really in. Really, really in. No one's got a philtrum like that. So you've really got to look at the shape. You know, if I bring a nose in there, if I bring a nose in there, so that's my nose coming in. Have I got something more like that, very subtle? Have I got something that's very straight? Or have I got something which is a little bit more prominent? Again, depending on your subject. Depends on what's going on here. So yeah, I was seeing a lot of this. And I was also actually seeing a lot of that. Like a proper hooked upper lip. Very cartoony. But it's because people weren't looking around, people weren't paying attention. And it is literally just these small little areas, like the philtrum underneath the lip. The point where the nose meets the face. These indentations either side where these fat deposits are. If you don't look at those small areas, everything else kind of falls apart. It is those small bits of detail that once you nail them, you're all good. So that's all I'm going to be going into with this video. Not a lot. Mainly, this is all just about observation. It's all about looking at those angles. It's all about studying your reference and remembering those curves. You've got a curvature for the cheeks and the forehead. They're roughly the same. But then you've got a much more extreme curve because it's a smaller cylinder for the mouth. And then how you line those up. Pupil going down from the front is roughly about where the corner of the mouth is, and then from the side, front of eye downwards is roughly where the corner of the mouth is. That'll help you get a good idea how to plot it in. And then it's just about that confidence. However you want to go about building those lips, give it a go. My method, I find it really nice. Slash it in, pull them, form it from there. Use curve brushes or separate meshes. You could use a cylinder as that upper maxillary area. It's just explore the software. If you think something might work, give it a go. Cool. And if you want me to go over anything else with you in person, or Dave, what do you think about this? I'll happily make a video, sit with you and go through that. So yeah, until next time.